Nathaniel and Kelly are a husband and wife duo specializing in trance channeling and mediumship mentorship. They help spiritual seekers gain clearer access to their intuitive abilities so that they can experience higher consciousness for themselves. In their work with clients, they focus on the flow method, which combines meditation, mindfulness, and flow states to get you out of your head, trust yourself, and improve your connection to spirit. We're chatting with Nathaniel and Kelly today on Third Eyesight. My name is Juan Francisco, and I'm a psychic medium and tarot card reader. I've always been curious about the supernatural, the paranormal, and psychic abilities, and I'm here to share my stories and interview folks who want to share their own stories with us. Let's get to it. Nathaniel and Kelly, thanks for coming on to Third Eyesight.
Thank you for having us.
We're so excited to be here.
Me too. I know we connected on social media a while ago, so it's so fun to actually talk to you live. I know we said this before we hit record, but I wanted to just give you the opportunity to tell our listeners where you're based and about your work, a little bit about your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are based on the West Coast right now. We're currently in Sedona, Arizona, a wonderful spiritual hotspot of a place.
Beautiful place to live here.
Absolutely.
We're loving it.
Lots of nature. Before that, we were in Los Angeles for over a decade. And then we grew up in California, and I was in Northern California, her in Southern California.
Yeah, but right now we're liking living here right now, but we're also really interested in traveling more and seeing what the rest of the world has to offer. And, you know, we're young and we want to see everything. So right now we're based here, but really we're based online. We're based anywhere we want to go.
Yeah, don't be surprised in like a year if that changes somewhere else. Like, we love traveling. We've been to a bunch of really cool places like China, Mexico,
Wow.
New Orleans, Savannah. Yeah, so
I love Savannah. I have such a soft place in my heart for Savannah, Georgia. My closest friends and family know that. But what has been your favorite spot where you have landed for a little bit so far?
So I'd say probably Sedona, the places we've lived, because we haven't lived in as many places as we've traveled to.
Yeah.
But that being said, favorite locations, has to be Italy.
Yeah.
Has to be Italy is our favorite place. Yeah.
We honeymooned in Italy. We pretty much flew into Rome and went all north. So we did Florence, Venice, Milan, Cinque Terre,
yeah,
Lake Como. It was a wonderful honeymoon, and it was an epic trip.
The art.
Yeah.
No, I love Italy. I was just there last year on my own for a solo trip, and
nice.
My first time in Florence, and I was single at that time, and I feel like I was falling in love. Like, it was such a romantic city. I didn't need a partner to feel romantic. It was amazing. I love Italy. Absolutely.
Yeah. We also fell in love with Florence, very much so.
Yeah.
It's special. Italy's very special. It is.
Yeah.
It is.
So.
Well, I'd love to ask you both, how did your journey start? Because I know that you both, you're involved in mediumship, mentorship, and trance channeling. So whether it's like how your journey together started, I would love to hear individually, like, how did each of you rediscover your abilities? And then also how you started working together, how you met.
Yeah. Well, like, that's honestly, we could probably do an entire episode just on that.
It's a story. It's a story.
Because like you pointed out, there are the individual threads, and then there's the point where they come together, and they're very like
different?
special and different in that way. So
I grew up in a family that's very spiritual. We're kind of all new age hippies. I grew up listening to people like Esther Hicks channel Abraham in the car on the way to preschool. So this was just normal in my life. We used to play telepathy games while waiting at restaurants for dinner. Who can read each other's mind better? So
I'm jealous. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah. Honestly, it was really fun growing up in my family. Everyone's a little bit wild. But it was a great time. And for me, I think that's made my journey a lot easier in so many ways, because I never had to get over as much fear in this field, because I don't know, it's just kind of normal. So I was doing a lot of stuff as a hobby in my spare time. My best friend and I used to give tarot readings to all our friends in college, and it was just kind of...
Yeah, you were known for those.
We were known for them.
Yeah.
Just because, what else do you do on a Friday night when you're in musical theater school? Some
folks party, some folks tarot, some people do both. Yeah.
Yeah. So point being, my world was very wrapped up in this, and it was very normal for me to practice this as a hobby, just because everyone kind of lived that way. So you were a little different.
Yeah, I came from like a really traditional like Catholic background, but my family was very like open-minded about these things and the idea of an afterlife and guides and stuff. And so they started introducing some books and concepts to me when I was like younger and in high school, and that kind of like nurtured my own fascination and interest in it. So I started exploring that a lot on my own. And then hilariously, we did go to the same college. We're both UCI grads and theaters, but she and our best friend are 2 years ahead of me. So we knew each other in college, but we weren't exactly like friends or close or anything like that. But I knew them, and I knew they were known for their tarot readings, right? That went around the circle. So I was like, oh, I gotta go to one of these times. Hilariously, I never did. I started kind of taking my own like psychic development courses, meditation trainings, mediumship training classes at a local place near the campus, and was focusing on my own growth, really. It wasn't until
pretty much
we ended up being introduced more seriously.
Our best friend pretty much told, she's both of our best friend at this point, but she pretty much told me, I met someone, I think he's going to be part of our lives. I think you need to be friends with him because I just feel like it's really important. And I was like, do we need another friend? We just graduated. I think we're good. And she's like, something in me is telling me you need to meet him. So we kind of met and became really good friends.
Yeah, honestly, hilarious. Like I said, we have a theater background, all three of us. So we ended up working on a show together at a theater,
very haunted
theater, and and
we talked to a lot of dead people.
Talking about their tarot reading. I was sharing the knowledge I was learning in these classes, which they didn't have, and it was this very synergistic,
amazing physical mediumship action going on in this theater, and it was a real bonding experience.
Actually, we got some information from them, some downloads about,
some of the concepts on our website,
universal principles that we kind of put on our website and stuff like that comes from spirit, to be honest, in that part of our life. But ever since then, we were hooked together, and
we were really good friends for about maybe 5 to 7 years before we started dating.
Amazing. So
we built a really solid friendship and foundation, and I think this was a huge part of our relationship because all of the spirituality gave us the same values. Mm-hmm. It gave us the same goals. It gave us the same interests. When we go to watch a movie, we have the same kind of interests. When we go to want to read a book together, we want to read the same kind of books.
And also inspiring each other to like grow, that growth mindset, both spiritually, personally, growing together, core values line up. So like, it was really great for us. And I think that's like, in some ways, the romance came later because we were so focused on those parts of it, but it ended up strengthening the romance later. And now it's just
we grew into really compatible romantic people. I think as we grew in our own spirituality and in our own self-growth, we became more compatible. And
wow, that's so interesting. Yeah. I hear what you're saying. It's like your spiritual development, your individual spiritual development aligned with your romantic development with each other, which is so fascinating. And then there's the bit, you started a business together, or you are business partners, right? So, and so did I hear you right that we're going to get into the universal principles in a second, that those were inspired by downloads you got while you were actors in college?
Yeah, there are 4 of the 6 were originally inspired by that. The other 2, I think I would say, were there, but came a little bit clearer a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. But that came from...
Specifically, I know the first one says Maz on the website, and that was a word given to us by Spirit that we use because they told us to.
Got it. It's really cool because it takes the idea of like unconditional love, right? But we have like one word for love in the English language, love. But it means so many different things. There's so many different people and situations and scenarios. And Maz is kind of this concept that encapsulates all of that. But it's not just human to human, it's human to spirit, human to nature, spirit's love for humans, spirit's love for nature, nature's love for us and them. So it's this kind of like intertwining unconditional love.
And we were told a lot that this idea of I see you as you are and I love you for who you are. At any stage without that judgment, it's I see you and I see you truly, and therefore I love you.
And that's all anyone ever wants, I think, intrinsically, right? That's all that our inner child wants. I mean, I'm doing a lot of inner child work right now, and that's what I'm learning as a lesson, is that's what my inner child wants, just to be loved for who he is. So I'm going to read I just love that you just said that. I'm going to read the 6 universal principles for our listeners. They could read this on your website. But first, strive to embody love, kindness, and compassion in all that you do. Number 2, follow your instincts and inner knowings above all else. It's your own personal compass and will never lead you astray in the long run. Number 3, live less in extremes and more in harmony, or the middle way. 4, live a life of purpose and conviction. 5, recognize that we're all in this together. Our sense of separation, isolation is a false perspective that is the result of fear, conditioning, and belief traps. That is so real. Number 6, learn to connect with a higher consciousness, spirit, and a greater reality for yourself through whatever ways excite you most. So you said that 4 out of the 6 of these you channeled. So you are students in college, theater students, and what was this experience like to receive this information? Could you walk me through? Yeah, how did you receive it?
Overwhelming.
I could imagine they're beautiful.
Yeah, well, and these concepts like were hard won. Like they wouldn't let up with us until we got it and felt it and got it right. And there's a lot of guessing around it until we got it.
We had to keep talking till they would give us the okay. And we had some really cool things where we get some really clear, like beep 1 for yes, beep twice for no. And we got some really clear responses. And if we didn't get it right, we got no's for hours. We had to just keep going around stuff until we really understood it to the point that we could talk about it.
Yeah.
So were these like, for lack of a better word, like seances, or were they like intentional sessions you would have in the theater or in a space at the college?
So seance is a pretty good word.
Seance is a pretty good word. I wouldn't like, don't think of it as like an occult seance per se. It wasn't that official, but like, yeah, we were in the theater rehearsing, setting up the gear, running through things. After like the students left, after everyone left, we're doing some tech setup in the after hours and stuff. And we just stop and have a conversation, figure these things out, get the downloads. And like I said, like we got a lot of like, there's like some taps up in the balcony that would start.
Music would turn on and off. We got clocks stopping. Wow. It was
like
wild.
Low key, I would argue low key physical mediumship results.
Oh, yeah.
And like we learned to like trust it and work with it. Like we protected the space. We weren't trying to do anything dangerous. I think that's why a lot of the concepts are very like loving and pure and universal, Yeah. And it felt right. When they land, like you feel it inside of you, right? That's why that second one is what we call knowing, listening to your own personal instincts. It's like your own personal compass,
when you know something's true, you know it. You don't have to be told. You can be told you're wrong, and you're like,
feel it in your jellies,
Yeah, you feel it.
Yeah, it's so interesting that we're talking about this because just a week or two ago, I struggle with anxiety, and I think I grew up conditioned to not listen to my intuitive gut feeling. And so I'm relearning all of that or rediscovering it. And just a couple weeks ago, I just had this realization that, I'm not a psychologist. However, this is my own personal experience that I think for me, my anxiety shows up when I'm not listening to my intuition. That's this quote unquote side effect of me not listening to my intuitions, that my anxiety shows up. And it's the, fear of the past, fear of the future, instead of being just present with my intuition, just knowing what the next step is based on my gut feeling. So yeah, the follow your instincts, that knowing, it's something that as I've developed more and more, because growing up in environments where you were supposed to worry about the future and the past.
Yeah, sure.
That's what I was taught, conditioned to believe. And I mean, I also grew up Roman Catholic, and I personally feel like Roman Catholicism, there is this, repent the sins you committed. It's about looking at the past and correcting the wrongs. So there's so much there, but I want to ask you about one of these principles, the live less in extremes and more in harmony, or the middle way. So I wanted to ask you both, what does it look like to not live in extremes, or what is that middle way? What have you discovered that middle way to feel like, look like?
Well, it's perfect that you segue into this one because we call this harmony. And this came directly after the knowing, because the whole point of harmony was to help you live aligned on your personal path. And that was the idea we're really hitting at. The middle way is a soft reference to some of our Buddhist training and background. The middle way is a huge concept there. But we are using it very much like everyone talks about finding balance, right? Which implies this like 50-50 kind of way of living, which for some people is right. It feels aligned for them to do that. But for some people, maybe it's more 75-25 to one side, or 60-40,
there's so many social expectations in the world. There's all these shoulds and all these have tos and all these, oh, you're good if you do this and you're slacking if you do that. but they're all based on someone's personal harmony that is being sent out as if it's an answer. And I think harmony comes back to this idea that no, that might be right for you, but I have to know what's right for me because there's only one me. And my harmony is about my truth and my balance and what's healing and right for me. And I don't have to judge yours if they're different because that's about you and what's right for you. And that's beautiful too. And now we have many amazing people in the world instead of a carbon copy of one.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like with social media, this is my own personal opinion, but with social media, I've noticed there are some people on social media who try to say what the right way is when it comes to psychic development or your psychic path. I guess we'll call it new age, like what the right new age approach is. And I've said this before in a past episode that when I don't no longer identify as Christian, I have my own relationship with Jesus as a guide. However, I don't subscribe to the religion of Christianity. And I feel like, especially as a queer man, I left Christianity because I was tired of being told what the right way is to be or to believe. And then I enter into the psychic realm of things and I see people do the same thing, just with different language and talking about different modalities. Like, well, this is not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to let people live in their bliss, their harmony, to follow their own bliss. So yeah, I totally hear you.
Yeah, I truly think that all the major religions and everyone's different perspectives and stuff, like we're all hitting on these same universal core principles. We might call it something different. You might have to read a little bit more into some people's language than others.
Yeah, there's some nuance.
At the end of the day, the core value of it is similar. And I think we all can relate and feel to that, however we see fit, which again does go back to the harmony. It's about what feels right
Your balance.
to you, recognizing that there's many, there's a huge gray area. Like the extremes tend to get a little dicey, not that there aren't exceptions to that and stuff like that. But one of the best metaphors I think we found for this is we watched a movie about extreme sports. I can't remember the name of it, but they're doing these crazy skiing adventures and stuff like that. And they talk about finding your line. You have to see your line before you go down the mountain. And your line and how you see your path down might be different than someone else's. And there might be points where they're similar because that's the right logical thing to do. And there's points where you're intuitively knowing your capabilities and limitations.
Your body,
And if you follow your line, you tend to get down safely. If you don't, that's when accidents happen. So it's that same idea with harmony.
And even on a ski slope, people may be starting from different parts at the top of the slope, different vantage points. Everyone's journey is so unique and different. And to tell people to subscribe to the way I lead my journey, it doesn't make any sense.
No, if it resonates, adopt it, take it with you as part of yours. And if it doesn't, let it go and keep going, Right. And that's where knowing came in first, was so you can know which was right and which was not. And then harmony was the guiding principle for alignment. And then generally we call it conviction. That was the next one, but living the life of passion and
not becoming
excitement.
Passive with your spirituality, not starting to say, oh, everything's fine, I'll just spiritually bypass all those challenges, but going, no, you have to engage, you have to show up. It might be challenging, but it's so worth it.
Yeah, it's not about becoming despondent and disconnected.
Yeah, exactly.
Spiritual growth should make you feel more connected,
more alive,
and let you realize that sense of interconnectedness that we all have, that oneness, which is why we ended up adding that one later down the line. And then the last came to greater reality, because when we stopped and looked back on everything, we realized the greater reality was a key component for the whole thing,
Yeah. I feel like we were put on this in this physical world as spiritual beings and human experiences, human bodies, for a reason. I think some escape spiritually is fine, but to always want to escape this existence, it's like, well, I would have stayed in the spiritual world if that was the case. I would have been born into a human body, right? Yeah, I love everything you both are saying. I think it's so important. And you've mentioned a phrase, spiritual bypassing. That phrase has been coming up on social media. Like the algorithm must be doing something on my feed, because that phrase keeps coming up for some reason. And I think that's so important. I feel like there are some schools of thought that it's like you have to be above human to find that bliss, or to find, and I can see the appeal to that, because it is hard being human. It's not easy. So yeah, I totally resonate with that. And I wanted to ask each of you, because each of you have a different modalities that you work on. So Nathaniel, I was really intrigued when I read that you have experiences with out of body experiences and astral travel. And I've known some people who've partaken in those practices and experiences. But for you, it sounds like those things have taken a role as part of your intuitive development and psychic development. So I'd love to hear from you, like how, because I haven't heard someone mention that to me, that astral travel has played a part in their development before.
Yeah, it's wild, right? I feel like astral travel, astral projection, out of body experiences, lucid dreaming, near death experiences, dream yoga, they're all aspects that so many people actually have personal experiences with, but we don't talk about it, you know? And what's crazy to me is that this field of practice has so much potential for so many other things: healing, connecting to dead loved ones, mediumship, your own personal growth, learning about the universe and stuff. It's wild to me. It's not talked about more. So when I first found out about that early on, like we had the whole theater experience and stuff like that. Maybe a few years after that, I was all in. I dropped my mediumship work. I dropped my psychic work. I dropped everything and went all in on this. And I'm a sleep baby. I need my like 9 hours of sleep a night. So a lot of the techniques at the time we're talking about, like messing, interrupting your sleep cycles and stuff like that to more easily access it. And I messed around with that. I did that, and I actually did it to success. I had a few experiences and lucid dreams and stuff like that. And my first one I'll never forget. It wasn't anything mind-blowingly cool or anything, but like you just don't forget that. And I was on a mission to find a way, like the grand mecca of it, to do it consciously while awake through meditation. There's no break in consciousness. There's no need to mess with your sleep cycle. And that took me into a lot of meditation training. And then I ran into a lot of natural obstacles, like kind of getting like dull and foggy, because everyone talks about trance as this really kind of like groggy borderline of sleep and all that stuff. And I was running into these issues where I just keep falling asleep or getting somewhere in that dreamlike state. And I'm like, this doesn't feel right. Well, that actually took me onto a path of looking into more traditional forms of meditation and concentration, samadhi practices in Theravadan Buddhism. So my journey actually segued for quite a few years into that. And while I originally found it for its more official mapped out meditation practice and training, as I started meeting these wonderful teachers, who are so wise and so genuine, and I started learning more about like the Dharma conceptually, and I learned how Buddhism is not necessarily a religion like Christianity or Catholicism is. It's a practice. So you can be a Buddhist Christian, you could be a Buddhist Catholic, a Buddhist whatever, spiritualist. These practices were so universal principles as well that, oh man, that talk about resonating in your jellies, right? So like I kind of kept up with that separately of everything else, kept up with the meditation, and had such wonderful transformative results with that. It helped me with so much of my anxiety and fear and getting out of my own head, quieting the mind, finding peace, that when I look back at it, I'm like, oh, well, that's what led me into the mediumship mentorship. Because I feel, and I know I've talked to clients and other practitioners who, when you get started with mediumship, there's tons of mediumship classes that will help you contact your guides, start sensing, what clair are you identifying with,
dead loved
ones. And there's like the mediumship 101 classes, as I call them. But once you get past that initial experience and you're actually trying to get more into this, there's like a drop off. There's like this like void where it's really hard to go through that kind of like intermediary zone. Because often what comes up is our own personal stuff. All right, we get in our own heads, the fear and the doubt come up. We start questioning things despite the evidence we're getting. Sometimes we have some bad teachers who, like you said, I think you mentioned it earlier, tell you what to do and how to do it, and it doesn't quite align for you. But then you have that, question of, should you do it? Are you not good enough doing it? whatever. And I was like, wow, all of this meditation and Buddhist practice that stemmed from the astral projection journey and the concept set of wider reality that gave me, fill that gap. Why aren't people realizing this? Like reading between the lines here, like there's so much like tender, like juiciness in here that we're not realizing. We don't need another mediumship reader in me. Like I'm okay. I enjoy it. It's fun. It's fun to connect and help people get those messages from their loved one or whatever. But like, man, taking those developing mediums, whether they're, little novice or like looking to go professional, and just helping them find ways to navigate their own fear and trust and actually quiet their mind and learn what concentration is, because it's not what you think it is, has been really, really just lovely to do. And it's become a whole passion of mine, helping people with that.
Do you find that, because what comes to mind for me is, because I've definitely dealt with the fear and the doubts, like, is this real? Is this happening? But also something I've heard some mediums tell me is they go through a period where things feel like they're stalling, or like, it's almost like, for lack of a better word, they're not impressed. It's maybe it's not that they're doubting the evidence coming through in their readings, but they don't feel as phased by it, or they feel like they're starting to take it for granted, and they're kind of like at a plateau. And do you feel like with the mentees that you work with, it's both like folks dealing with the fear, the anxiety, the doubt, and believing in themselves, as well as folks who feel like, I'm kind of like things are going fine, but things either feel quiet or things are stalling? Like, do you feel like this is also a way to address that, what you were just describing?
Yeah, it definitely works. I kind of call it, it's like disillusionment, right?
Right.
And what
Yeah.
happens is, when we start getting into this field, even if you're not a medium or a practitioner in that regard, looking to go professional with this, when you start coming across these concepts and you start opening up more spiritually, and you kind of go through your own awakening process and journey, at some point in time, it becomes normalized. It becomes integrated into our mind and our bodies. And it feels just like normal daily life now. You become disillusioned with it a little bit. You start taking it for granted. And what I've realized is that our spiritual growth and our personal growth are completely intertwined. And at some point in time, what happens is you need to volley back and forth. You've pushed the spiritual growth. You're probably being called to shift gears into the personal growth a little bit more, which will kick up something, start something, heal something that then takes you back into a new sense of passion with the spiritual growth, and vice versa. Like, you can't separate them at a certain point in time. And I think that's what often happens.
Thanks for sharing that. I usually don't make things about myself in interviews, but it's wild the things you are both bringing up today, because what you just described just now is exactly what I'm going through at this very moment with a mentor that I'm working with. So that was perfect for you to bring that up for me on a personal level, but I'm sure folks listening could really use what you just said too.
We've gone through that too.
Yeah.
Many times.
I mean, these kind of things like synchronicity and validation, right? These are great moments just to like take a second and lock in that trust, right? That's how we develop trust in this field. It helps counteract our doubt, little moments like this, these little like nods.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Kelly, I would love to hear from you. How would you describe, I've heard the phrase trance channeling, before, and I feel like I know what it is, but for those who are listening who have no idea what it is, like, what is trance channeling and how is it different from mediumship?
So to me, it's about where the spirit hangs out. So when you're doing mediumship, I'm here, I'm me, and I'm talking to someone on, let's call it the other side of the veil, who's not physically here. I feel like there's a lot of nuance in definitions, and I don't think we have a fully defined lexicon. But generally speaking, it's probably a dead person. They're probably someone you knew or someone you knew, and they're probably not in the room with you. And you are in the room with you. So that to me is mediumship. So trance channeling is when the spirit's very much in my space, and I actually pull myself as far removed from as possible from my conscious mind and let this spirit take over my entire body. They speak for me, they move for me, they can heal for me. If they want to get up and dance around, then they get up and dance around. For the time that they are using this body, it is their body. Now, I personally do this with two guides that I trust very deeply that are my good friends. I think it's very much a relationship that you form. And the two master guides that channel through me, really, that talk through me, they're great people. Like, and not to say sound weird, but like, they're really lovely and wonderful and way wiser than I'll ever be. So the best thing I can do is get as out of the way as possible so that they're able to communicate everything they know that I don't. And the more that I, have, the longer I've done this for a while now. And at this point, I'm so far removed that it's almost like I'm not even there. And there's gaps of space where I don't have any recollection at all. Like, I'm not even sure I was present or conscious. And that means that they have a lot of room to say whatever they need to or heal however they need to.
Yeah, you're
Wow.
really out of the way, not influencing things.
I'm completely out of the way, not
Particularly on
things.
that end of the spectrum too, when you have those kind of like, blank moments.
And do you trans channel, if I don't know if that's the right verb, do you trans channel with any kind of spirit that needs to come through, like someone's deceased loved one versus like
So I
a
don't.
spirit guide? Okay.
I just work with these two guides. It's super intimate because they're taking over my body and I have to have complete trust with them. And I have to give them complete permission.
It's very consensual.
It has to be. And I like, even now, my process, one of the things I do as I go down is to tell them, I give you complete control. I trust you entirely. So it very much feels like they are holding my human in their hands. And for a little while, I'm going to place down being human and they're going to pick it up for me. And I'm sure someone maybe out there would be able to channel a whole bunch of people coming through them. But for me, that level of deep trust and complete surrender takes a relationship. And we've built that. Like, I talk with them. They know me. I know how they work. I can stand up in the middle of a room, close my eyes, and they can walk me around, and I have no desire to take over my body. They're fine. They've got me. If they want to run me into a wall, then they probably will. They haven't yet. But I would trust them that much. And that's why I only channel these two master guides that I know.
That's beautiful. And this makes me want to ask this question because I was actually talking to another to an energy healer a couple weeks ago who also has a background in acting. And I wanted to ask you both, and when you brought up the theater background at the beginning of the episode, I immediately thought of this question, but this is a good spot to ask it, I think. If I were to say that acting of itself is a form of channeling, because you are portraying a character, even though maybe it's a fictitious character, like how does that sit with you? I don't have that solid opinion, but I'm wondering if you feel like there is a similarity for you as practitioners between your practice in theater as actors versus the practice that you do. Well, maybe you still act, but versus what you do in terms of energy healing and channeling and mediumship.
Yeah, so I will definitely take that one. So to me, there's a pretty big difference between channeling and trance. Trance and trance channeling, anything really with that trance word.
Trance speaking,
trance healing. I cannot have an awareness of myself. I have to completely be removed. It is a very out of body experience. As someone who's done a lot of theater, and I teach singing still, I've taught singing most of my life. There is a sense of channeled information and a flow that definitely happens, but the performer is still present. They are just using themselves in that present moment to be a conduit. When I'm doing trance, I am not present. And that to me is the big difference.
Which is why I would add on, for someone doing more like mediumship work, giving voice to the loved one, acting as an intermediary, or even like psychic work, anything where like you're still present as a practitioner. It's a very similar cathartic experience to being on stage. Anyone who's done any kind of performing, improvisation, it's a very yes and experience, going with the flow, the live audience, the open-heartedness of it all. So it sounds like, I would argue that yes, it's very similar for a lot of these practices. Trance channeling and that kind of trance work is the unique caveat.
Yeah, though I will say, being in this field tends to create a sense of trust and a loosening of our need for control that I think leads nicely into this work. So I think there is a correlation between, if you can let yourself allow a character to flow through you, well, it's just a little bit less scary to let a guide flow through you. And if you can let a guide flow through you, is it really that different to get out of the way?
Yeah, that's so true. And I find that a lot of folks in the energy healing or the psychic mediumship space or the channeling space have some kind of artistic hobby or passion or have a background in it. I find that's no mistake. I find that really interesting.
There's a lot of, oh no, go ahead.
I would like to hear your thought on that.
Oh, I was gonna say, I have heard so many different teachers and or talked to so many practitioners, not just mediums, not just trance channelers, and so many people in this field, where the imagination and creativity are so intimately linked to these practices. And I think for people just starting out who maybe aren't quite as developed in this field or just want to bring it in for their own personal lives too, um, don't be afraid to use your creativity and imagination. At first, yeah, you might not know if that's your guide or loved one, giving you some synchronicity or validation or that message in your head. Other times it's really obvious and it hits you like a ton of bricks and you're like, I can't deny that. But like a lot of times it starts off kind of in a similar field, right?
Yeah, it's okay to make believe.
It's similar to kind of these more creative, open-hearted, imaginative spaces. But what happens is when you get used to operating from that perspective, you start to differentiate. What's your thought? What's theirs? What's your feeling? What's theirs? And it turns into something that becomes clear, but it never becomes that clear if you don't give it a chance to grow in the first place. We shut it down because our doubt, our fear, our socialization, our logic gets in there, our intellect. And it's useful to bring in. We want that whole spectrum, but sometimes we have to choose which way of looking at things is more effective in this moment. And sometimes, so like, don't be afraid to dive into that imaginative space, that creative space, because you're right, there's huge common threads between the two.
Yeah, and some folks talk about spirit uses, at least like when engaging in mediumship, that spirit uses the dictionary in our heads of symbols, images, personal experiences to help us channel a message with them. And it's like when someone is innovative and thinks of an invention or a new idea, they're taking from that same dictionary of experiences and things they know in symbols, right? So I love how you just connected imagination to this work. I think that's so important because it's all coming from the same place. Absolutely. You offer a mediumship that flows mentorship program, and I wanted to ask you, what's the most common challenge you notice mentees facing on their journey in that program?
There are two very common ones without a doubt. One, people have a really hard time getting out of their own head, quieting the noise, quieting the chatter, the analysis, that kind of third camera-iness that kind of comes up. So for sure that one. And then secondly, it's usually the fear and the doubt to some degree of manifestation, right? That creates insecurity, holds them back. Despite giving great evidence or having a great reading, we still doubt ourselves. Is it going to work next time? Is this really happening? Is this real? There's still so much of you involved that it doesn't quite entirely go away. So it's really the name of the game at that point of development is learning how to work with those kinds of things and use a training method that allows you to work with those problems specifically so you can do the mediumship you've been trying to do, the techniques there, the connection, the patterns of readings and stuff like that more effectively. It's helping you get out of your own way, really, and trust yourself.
Been there.
Yeah.
And when you work with mentees, do you feel like a lot of, or not that you feel like, do you notice that a lot of them, are they very green to mediumship? Have they been practicing mediumship for a number of years? Like where are they usually on their journey when they come to see you?
Yeah, so I kind of call them all developing mediums because like we're all developing mediums, right? I don't believe this is
I love that answer. Yes.
Yeah, I don't think any of this is a skill that's unique to like certain people. Some people might have a proficiency for it, but it doesn't mean that you can't do it to some degree. So obviously, if you're professional in this space and you're earning a good living doing this, like we could probably have a great conversation. There's things that we can exchange back and forth that will help. But for the bulk of who I'm talking to, it's either the complete newbies at mediumship who somewhere need like the mediumship 101 classes still, but like the training that I work with them with will apply really well to those classes. It's just that my mentorship program is not focused on the 101 skills. It's complementary to that because the bulk of people I work with are like middle of the pack, intermediate, developing mediums who are doing this, know what they're doing, just having that little bit of extra trouble getting out of their way and trusting themselves, getting out of their head, not interpreting the messages and stuff, and hoping to go pro, hoping to start doing this. And even some semi-professional mediums who are kind of starting to charge and do readings, but like the stresses and the fear of running a business and starting to charge for readings are starting to come in and affect their readings, which is the same kind of core fear getting in your head process. So it still works, but I'd say the bulk are just those solid middle of the pack developing mediums. Yeah.
Got it. Now I'm going to pretend that I am a mentee, and I want to hear your answer to this question because I'm really curious. When will I know that I mastered mediumship? I'm playing devil's advocate by asking that question too.
No. I love it.
I think it's an interesting question. Some of us, when we start out, we think I want to master it. I'm curious, like, what would you say to a student or to a mentee who asked you that?
Well, first off, the obvious, you're never going to master it. There's no such thing as mastering it to a degree that you got it, you're done, you're perfectly confident. Not when you're making millions of dollars for reading. If you're a celebrity medium, you're still going to run into fear and doubt because it's human nature, right? So there's no getting around that. I would say from a certain perspective, you've mastered it when you can show up in service of what the guides and the loved ones are calling you to do, to speak for them, to give those messages with trust, with confidence, surrendering in that process and not holding yourself back from sharing this. And when you can do that regularly and consistently, to keep spreading light and love and healing for people, then you've mastered the art of mediumship in that way. Not to say that there isn't plenty more to learn and things to watch out for, because, conditions always change, but yeah.
Yeah, there's no end to learning. And the reason I ask is because I know that there are some listeners who are discovering their psychic abilities or their mediumship abilities and haven't maybe delved into it yet. And I feel like a lot of us do think there's a way to master it. In dictionary traditional sense of the word master, right? Yeah, I absolutely agree. Now, for you two working as a couple, I'm curious, like Kelly and Nathaniel, like what are people may have all these opinions like, oh, it'd be a dream to work with my partner, my romantic partner in business. And for others, like, I don't know. So I wanted to ask you, what have been the amazing opportunities that has brought for you and then the healthy challenges?
Go. I know what you're going to say.
Let's start with synergism. Because we're both doing this, we ask more of each other. And so it's always, oh, you found that? That's awesome. Can I build on that? Oh, I found that. Can you build on that? Yeah. So we're constantly
we have
growing.
We have different backgrounds. We had different skill sets, different ways of looking at things, but we're often aimed in the same direction. So it becomes a very complementary process that sometimes fills in the gaps beautifully and other times asks us to level up for each other for that end result. I will say, like, if I had to pick one, it's been a dream, right? We're very lucky to not only have supportive families who still come to our workshops and stuff like that and ask about this stuff and are on their journeys and consult with us. We have the family support, we have the support in our spouse and each other, and we're very lucky because that doesn't happen a lot.
When one of us says, like, I have a really strong feeling about this, there's no real debate. It's okay, I believe you.
Yeah.
Great. Let's move forward. We don't really tend to have that challenge of like, well, are you crazy? Like, no, I don't think you're crazy. I believe you and I trust you.
No, if she finds a good book or a good documentary or something like that on this, she's showing it with me. I'm like, I want to see that. I'm not going to be like, okay, honey, that's your thing,
So it's fun,
So that's great. I would say the healthiest challenge that it's brought, though, it's just like, we started as great friends. We became romantically involved. Now we're husband and wife. We are business partners. We're spiritual partners. And within the spiritual practices, you've already hit on the fact that we have a lot of modalities between the both of us. So there's a lot of subcategories to that too. So it's just a lot of hats to wear. And sometimes,
we've had to learn to communicate and say, hey, right now, I probably do need to level up as a human, but right now just hold me and tell me I'm pretty. Or, kind of thing, like right now I need comfort and love.
Like, yes, I know this life lesson's coming back up.
We'll talk about that later.
I just need to get some pets right now. And then we can talk about what's going on and
how to become a better person. So we've had to learn how to communicate that because, we're not mind readers most of the time.
I can imagine just like the easy opportunities for gaslighting, like, babe, that's not part of the path you talked about. It's just like, let me just eat the burger right now. Okay. Thank you. Anyways.
No, and that's the thing. You have to know when you have to be able to communicate for yourself. In this moment, I need my husband, or in this moment, I need the person who's going to hold me accountable, and I'm responsible for communicating that, and he's responsible for communicating that. And, when we have it communicated, we have to respect it. Even if you're like, no, but I know you're going to be unhappy next week. You know what? But that's your call. And I love you enough to respect you to make your own call in your own life. Even if I think you might, regret it later. That's not on me. That's on you.
Love that. I love that. And what would you say to a listener who is curious about tapping into their intuition, their psychic ability, but feels, and we've hit on this a little bit, but if someone were to ask you, like, I want to delve into this, but I'm afraid, I feel nervous, what would each of your responses be?
So as someone who has literal spirits talk through their body, there is so little scary out there. Honestly, we do a lot, and we test as many boundaries as we can find. If there's somewhere that's considered haunted, we're probably showing up.
Savannah.
Yeah, Savannah.
Yep.
As many times as we can in every way we can. And there is such an overwhelming amount of good out there that if you can just find the littlest bit of courage to dip your toe in, you'll probably be given back 100 times the good feelings that you put out. It's so rewarding. And I mean, I really believe everyone is spiritual intuitive. I think everyone is psychic. Everyone has connection to these abilities. So if you can just put yourself out there a little bit, you're going to get so much back. It's totally worth the nerves.
10 seconds of courage.
10 seconds of courage.
I would also add on that when you start really diving into more things like astral projection and some of these more like fluid practices, fear is inevitable. Mm-hmm. It's going to come up in any practice. So the two things to really recognize is, one is most of the bad encounters we have, not saying that there aren't certain exceptions, but most of the time, if you encounter something bad, it's your fear manifested. And so taking on a personification or something to challenge you, which really leads to the second point, which is that you need to have a healthy system in place to work with the fear, not just become reactionary to it and let it shut you down and stunt your growth or
ignore it and be like, oh no, I'm safe no matter what. It's fine. I mean, that seems risky too.
No, it's start training yourself to be mindful and recognizing how the fear shows up for you. Where does it live in your body? What situations bring it out? Then start diving in with it. Why? Use that fear to bring you information, to bring you insight, because that wisdom will further your growth and further your development instead of hold you back.
Yeah, back to that human development and spiritual development going together.
Can't separate them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's also another component here. There's so much conditioning. First thing I think of is like horror movies. Now, I personally don't mind a good horror movie, but of course that shaped how I thought of haunted houses. And I think I've come to learn too, I've also been on a lot of paranormal investigations, a lot of haunted places. And when something has spooked me, it's only spooked me because either I saw it in a horror movie, like a knock on the door, that in itself is not spooky. And if I'm here saying, can you give me a sign you're here? And they knock and then I freak out, I'm sure that spirit's like, well, you asked me to do it. I don't know why you're scared.
Can we talk about like my number one fear? And I know other people feel this. It's the jump scare. It's you're brushing your teeth, you look up in the mirror, and then there's like the dead, scary face of the person behind you for the flash, and you're like, that's Hollywood conditioning right there. Anytime we've actually genuinely connected with spirit, most of the time it's been positive and loving, and those are beings that would respect you and respect your boundaries in space. They wouldn't try to cause you that. You know
what, from the other perspective of people that were raised with ghosts of your friends, I've had pretty much that experience and not been afraid of it. I've looked up in a mirror and I saw a face directly over mine. I was like, oh, hi. And yeah, it was the middle of the night, but I just stopped and had a conversation and then went back to bed and it was fine. And I met a cool friend who was passing through and then she passed on and it was fine.
Goals. That's goals right there.
Yeah, we're all just still a little jealous of her upbringing and her lack of socialization.
Nathaniel and I will get to that point one day with faces in the mirror.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think the point is, it wasn't malicious. She just wanted to say hi and was passing through and saw me. And that's kind of like if you imagine someone's passing by on the street and was like, oh, hi, nice jacket. Like, it's kind of the same thing. That wouldn't be scary. Why is it scary if they're dead?
I'd like to amend my previous answer to the mastering mediumship. I've mastered mediumship when I can have a jump scare in the mirror and not blink twice and keep doing this.
I would say the same. I'd say the same. Now, before we wrap up, I wanted to just mention two things. Have you been to the Savannah Theater in Savannah, Georgia?
I don't think we have.
I think it's an old theater. It's an old like not movie theater, but like a traditional theater with a stage. And it is purportedly haunted. I did a paranormal investigation there once. It was like 11 p.m. to 12 a.m. You know, they do it at late at night. It was so cool. Highly recommend if you haven't been. And you know, it's a theater. You know, it matches very well with your personalities. But it was very active, and it was a wonderful experience. So I highly recommend. And also,
did you check out the Sorrel Weed House when you were there?
Yes, I did, and I love.
We did a paranormal investigation there.
I did that there. I did that there too. Yeah,
Nice.
I didn't. You know, it's interesting because a lot of these spots, haunted spots, it's interesting because the staff that work at these spots, they'll tell you on a personal level, like, there's nothing scary here. But marketing wise, you know, they have the black and white images with like a spooky animated ghost, like, we're haunted, come visit, you know. And it's just interesting to me. It's just how marketable spook is. But when you're there, it's like, oh, there's, you know, a little voice came through the recorder, and it's cool. It's really cool.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
Yeah. And number two, Nathaniel, I noticed you're wearing the Nazca lines on your shirt.
Oh, yes. Points.
I just posted about the Nazca lines like a week ago. Maybe you saw it.
You know, it's so funny. We were talking about, like, I was going to grab another button up to wear, and she's like, you should wear a Nazca line shirt. I'm like, you know what? I should. I actually just got it, hilariously. We were on a trip to in New Mexico. We went to Albuquerque for the first time. Santa Fe.
And we did ghost tours at both places.
We went to Roswell.
As you do.
So.
But we walked into a store and they just put them out. They just got them in. They didn't know what it was. I'm like, that's awesome. The Nazca lines on a t-shirt. Yes.
Well, it's funny. It's a week ago. I was in Texas visiting Peruvian. I'm part Peruvian, Peruvian family. And my Peruvian family is they're from a small desert town called Ica, an hour or an hour and a half away from Nazca, where the Nazca lines are.
Cool.
And I had not realized, I learned something new about the Nazca lines, so I posted about them because I was re-fascinated with them. I've never seen them. As many times as I've been to Peru to see family, I've never seen them in person, but I just thought really cool synchronicity that you're wearing a Nazca lines t-shirt. And I'm Peruvian. I just posted about them last week. So there you go.
That's awesome.
Bucket list trip.
Yes, I would really. Have you been to Peru?
No, it's still on the bucket list.
It's on the list.
Machu Picchu, of course, is where to go. But yes, you both would love it. Absolutely love it. But tell awesome. Listeners how they can find out more about you and what you do.
So, I mean, obviously, first things first, we're both on Instagram. We love to socialize with people, interact, DM us with questions, stories, whatever. Generally, anything we announce in the future will always be on Instagram as well. But if you're excited and want to come work with us and see some of the stuff that we're doing, there's a couple things that you can do literally after you finish listening to this episode. So the first is that we're running these live online Trance Teaching Series workshops, which is a great chance for you to come meet us live.
Meet my guides,
her two guides, Hecate and Freya.
You can come meet them.
What's cool about these is they're free. They're very community driven, and we know just as much as the people coming. So we go and talk to the guides. They give us a topic and a theme, a few words about it, and that's it.
Yep.
So we're going with the flow and learning, and there's healing done, and there's usually a chance for Q&A and stuff like that, and a lot of wisdom. And
I have no idea what happens till I watch the playback. Super fun.
I host it just to kind of keep the peace and keep things flowing. Not that there's been any issue, but so for one, you can definitely sign up for that. The page will either show you what the next one is, or it'll give you a chance to sign up to be notified of the next one. The second thing you can do is, if you're interested, if you're either a developing medium or you're kind of inquisitive about this and looking to kind of start developing your skills, you want to get a good foundation. A lot of what we teach comes back what we call the flow method, which encapsulates a lot of the meditation, mindfulness kind of practices that we do in the flow states to help you get out of your head, trust yourself, and better connect to spirit. And that's the core technique of my Mediumship That Flows program. So I actually have a free masterclass video you can go watch right now that talks you through the flow method and gives you some more information about that. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing that you can do.
Yeah, you can come book a session with me and my guides. So if you want to receive healing from them, or you want to receive guidance from them, ask them some questions about your life. I've rarely found any questions that they don't answer. So you can pretty much ask them anything and they'll have some sort of extremely wise statement about it. And I found a lot of times if you book a healing, they'll usually give you a chance to ask questions. If you book a guidance session, they'll probably do some healing on you. So you can actually meet them and have some one-on-one quality time with some of the wisest beings I've ever had the honor to meet.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's super cool. And I'm gonna link all of this for listeners in the show notes, the podcast description, everything aforementioned you can find in the podcast description. So I'm so happy that I reached out to you folks, and this was so delightful and so enlightening, and I learned a lot from it. And you both just have such a warm, charismatic energy. You both are wonderful. So, and I really mean, I'm not saying it just because we're recording. So thank you both so much. Thank you for your time, your energy to do this episode with me, and super appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us on. It was lovely meeting you. And honestly, I hope anyone listening in feels, a connection too. We would love to meet you guys too. It's been really wonderful. Thank you for having us.
If you have a question or topic you want me to cover on Third Eyesight, head to my website, juanfranciscospirit.com/contact, and send a message my way. If you really enjoyed this episode, leave a review wherever you listen. I'd really appreciate it.